Ladies and gentlemen, sports fans alike, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. One of the couple, two, three best podcasts around. So sit back, grab yourself a cold one and a Polish sausage, park your keister in the French room, and listen to Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
In Chicago, you know that all sports rock. The Bears, Hawks, Bulls, Cubs and Sox. Pick your favorite, you can choose. As long as the Packers lose. For everything you need to know, it's Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. This is your host, Sean. And in this episode of the show, we will be talking about Kris Bryant getting knocked on the head, Kevin White getting knocked on the shin, and the White Sox getting knocked back to reality. But before we start, let's give a shout out to our sponsor, the Rockford Ice Hogs. Sure, the season is over, but that doesn't mean you can't support the team from having a great season last year by stopping off and picking up a shirt, hat, or some other type of merchandise from icehogs.com, the Rockford Ice Hogs official web store. So make sure you show support of your team. And when the season starts, which is coming up soon in October, just a couple of short months away, you will be ready to go. Only 90 minutes from the city limits and fun for the family. Go to icehogs.com. And let's just start really quickly. For those of you that have not listened to the show before, this is a by the fans, for the fans show. Unlike some of the other big radio shows that like to put fans on hold and never let them get on the air, and when they do, make fun of them, that's not what we do. This is a by the fans, for the fans show. Anytime you have a question, feel free to email us, call us, whatever you want to do. All of our contact information can be found at swerskisports.com. That's SWERSKI sports.com. Hit us up on Twitter at Swerski Sports or Facebook.com/Swerski Sports. And if you are a fan of this show or you a new person listening to this show, the best way you could show support is to subscribe to us on whatever medium you listen to, whether that be iTunes or Stitcher, or even if you listen on YouTube, whatever, just hit subscribe. And if you want to leave some comments or some positive feedback, that's always helpful too. Or you can tell a friend or friends, plural. Whatever way you want to get the show listened by more people, that's always appreciated. I had planned to start talking about baseball because we are getting pretty close to the end of the season. We're about 50-some games left of the 162-game season, and we are really starting to count down and watch this wild card series, race, etc. play out. But I just got back from Bears training camp over the weekend, which is still going on, and I've still got the sunburn to show it. The media does not get any sort of shade for the training camp, none whatsoever. It's pretty ridiculous. You are just out in the heat and in the sun, and I did not have any hat or sunscreen. Now I look like a lobster. It's the opposite of awesome. So I decided to switch it up and talk a little Chicago Bears first. I guess the big story is that first round pick, number 7 overall, Kevin White, has not played. He is on the PUP list, the physically unable to perform list, for a shin, some sort of vague shin injury. And I'm not sure what's going on because everyone is, from John Fox to Ryan Pace to Kevin White to anybody that has a inside knowledge of what's going on, nobody's seeming to be fessing up to what's going on, which is a little scary. Apparently he's keeping up his cardio by doing non-impact type athletic things, aerobic things like swimming. But that's a lot different than him going through and actually playing in pads, because that's really where you're going to get the reps and get NFL ready. It's a little bit scary for what to expect from the offense if their number one pick is not practicing yet by 5 days into training camp. So that's a story that I don't really have much else to say, but it's something we're going to definitely keep our eye on. It's a little bit of a worrisome thing at this point, because nobody seems to be talking and nobody seems to be giving any sort of concrete details. Hopefully it's something that he'll be ready to start practicing by the first game of the preseason against the Dolphins, but I'm not holding my breath. And as an NFL wide receiver, it's a tough position to learn, especially if you're going to be missing part of training camp. It's one thing to sit there with your iPad and look at the plays. It's another completely different thing to being out on the field and getting those reps, because those reps are everything. The other big story that made me want to put the Bears on the front burner is something that I got a bunch of Twitter messages and emails about already, and it's it's that apparently there was an article where the USA Today did computer simulations of every NFL game and came up with their predictions, and they have the Chicago Bears being 3-13 and having the worst record in the NFL. And to add insult to injury, they have the Green Bay Packers finishing with the best record in the NFL and ultimately going on to beat the Indianapolis Colts for the Super Bowl. I don't know their methodology. I don't know what they did to come up with that projection, but I'm calling shenanigans. I think that's complete bullcrap. First, I'm going to go through what things I saw during training camp, and then I'm going to tell you my reasons why I think that's complete crap. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about my really early projections for the season. So first of all, is the camp so far is I think the defense, my first thought is the defense has looked like it has an identity. They are playing really physical, really aggressive, hitting hard, and it seems like everybody's got a chip on their shoulder, which they should have had before last season. So that's nice to see that it's just that the team is starting to develop an identity, and you really expected that to happen with John Fox coming in as the head coach and bringing Vic Fangio as his defensive coordinator. Something had to give, and it really seems that these guys are giving it their all. Even a guy like Jared Allen, who's at the twilight of his career, he's excited. I mean, on Sunday during practice, John Fox has been playing music during the game or the practices, and it's been varying players that get to play their songs. And somebody was playing AC/DC's "You Shook Me All Night Long," and Jared Allen was doing an air drums to the thing, and so that was fun to see. I wasn't able to record it because it was during a session which media was not allowed to film. So unfortunately, I don't have that for you. But trust me, some of the media that were there, we were laughing about it. It was kind of funny. But even a guy like that who's in the twilight of his career is excited about the camp, is excited to be playing a new position that he's never played before. That just speaks volumes about what this organization and this new coaching staff have tried to instill in what they're doing. The defensive line and the linebacking core has looked pretty darn good. I mean, I sat and watched a lot of the outside linebacker drills, and those guys just look impressive. I really thought that Lamar Houston would be a guy that would be playing defensive end. But just watching some of his moves and how quick and vicious he was coming around corners, it's going to be hell watching him, try to disrupt the play and get after the quarterback, because he looked like a nasty, mean, awful man out there. Very brutal. The cornerbacks have looked decent. I didn't get to see a lot of the safeties, but that's already a little thin as it is as far as the roster goes. Antrell Roll looked a little fat, for lack of a better term. I'm not joking you. He looked a little fat. I think he might have had a flak jacket on, which isn't going to help anything, but he looked a little bit slow, a little bit fat out there, which has me worried. But he's a veteran with a good track record, and John Fox has praised him so far. So I'm not gonna hold it to anything, because honestly, the safeties are what I watched the least this training camp. I watched very little of them because the way that they had everything, the position players marked off, it was hard to get over to everything. Running backs, there's a plethora of them. Alshon Jeffrey and Eddie Roy have looked great. I almost got taken out by Alshon Jeffrey. He caught a slant pass, took it in for a touchdown, and ran through the back of the end zone where I was kneeling, watching the plays, and I had to jump out of the way because he almost took me out. And it was the first time I was standing next to Alshon Jeffrey, and he's a really big man. I'm a big dude. I'm 6'1", like 240, and he made me feel small. So all in all, the team, the defense is looking like it's gelling much faster than I was expecting. A lot of people are just really excited to try this new defense and see what it's about. They like the flexibility that they have. They're given a responsibility, and they're told that they have an end of the bargain to hold up to A, to make this team, B, to have valuable minutes to play on this defense, and as a responsibility to their teammates in this team to do so. These guys are taking it very seriously, and it's been great to hear them excited talking about it, and it's been great to see them, how quickly they're gelling. The offensive line has been up and down a little bit. I expect that to gel a little more. Fabeluge, the new rookie tackle, he looks like a mammoth out there. He looked all right in practice. If he has any sort of athleticism at all, he's going to be a sleeper pick, because the guy is just absolutely massive. Even standing next to massive guys like Kyle Long and Matt Slauson and Jermon Bushrod, he looks massive compared to those guys. So it's going to be interesting to see what shapes up with the right side of that offensive line. I think we're pretty set with Slauson at the left guard and Jermon Bushrod at left tackle. It's going to be interesting to see if they kick out Kyle Long to right tackle and put somebody in a guard, or if they leave Kyle Long at the right guard spot and finally settle in that right tackle position. Will Montgomery has been getting all the starting snaps at center. I didn't get to see much of Hronis Grasu, but it's going to be interesting to see if he's able to take over that mantle this season or not. But all in all, this has been a much better camp. Last season I went into camp later in the training camp period, where theoretically they should be at their peak and ready to play in the season, and I went during the first couple of days of practice already, and this team this year seems more gelled and more ready to play a meaningful game than the team did last year right before the season started. So that says something right there. Like I said, you have John Fox, who's a no-nonsense coach. He's coming in here. He's going to get rid of anybody that's trouble. He's going to get rid of anybody that's not buying into the program. Vic Fangio, you could hear him screaming at the players, dropping the F-bombs like crazy. nobody's going to get away with crap that they pulled with, last year in Mel Tucker. Guys won't be out there playing if they don't know their defensive positions. They're not going to be out there if they're not playing hard. And Vic Fangio is going to have them ready to play. And Adam Gase is a guy who's going to put in an NFL ready offense. And unlike Mark Trestman, who I think got caught up in his own quote unquote offensive genius, I think a lot of times, honestly, he outthought himself and he had difficulty with in-game calling. Could he go out back and diagram what was going on and how they should played it from game film? Oh, absolutely. I don't think the guy's dumb. But in games, I think he really got overmatched and outthought and really, it's the word I want to use. I honestly think that Mark Trestman just he got gun shy in the big moments, and I don't think Adam Gase is going to be that way. This isn't going to be the Green Bay Packers offense. It's not going to be even the Detroit Lions offense, but I think this offensive line is going to gel and be much more solid than it was last year. The wide receiving core, if you can get Kevin White back healthy, I think it's going to be pretty formidable. You know what you have in Alshon Jeffrey. Eddie Royal has looked great, and he already seems to have gotten that rapport back with Jay Cutler because Jay's been very comfortable throwing to him. If you get Kevin White back, Marquise Wilson has looked pretty good in camp. So you have at least 4 wide receivers deep of talented guys. You know what you have in running back in Matt Forte. And it'll be interesting to see what the other 3 backs look like with some meaningful minutes. So I think the offense will be steady. I don't think they're gonna be gangbusters out there, but I think they're going to be steady and they're going to at least maintain reasonable amounts of possession time in order to keep that defense fresh, which is always important. So now going back to the projection from USA Today, where the Bears are going to be the worst team in football, I just don't see it. I just don't see it. If this was the same Trestman regime in there, I would say that's a realistic possibility because they would already probably be losing the locker room and there'd be upheaval, and that's just not going to happen with a veteran coach and a veteran defensive coordinator. It's just not going to happen where you're going to lose people like that, especially not this early going. So we're going to go game by game really quickly I'm going to tell you which games I think they're going to win and what their record is. And right now, I haven't seen anybody play a game yet. The first preseason game's not until August 13th. So we have, it's a week from Thursday that they have their first game. So at this point, it's really a gut feeling off of what I've seen and what the moves are and the coaching staff. But game 1 against Green Bay Packers, the talent gap is still not there. They're not going to get whitewashed like they did last year, but they're also not going to win. Green Bay Packers are going to win this game. Bears are going to be 0-1 at that point. The Cardinals were a solid team last year, but they're not without their holes either. I think it's possible. This is a toss-up game. It's going to be at home, so it's a home game for the Bears. I'm going to say the Bears are going to win this one. It's going to be a hard-fought game, but I think it's going to come down to, that the Bears are going to have a better running game. So I'm going to go Bears win this one. 1-1 at this point. Third game is they are in Seattle to play the Seahawks. I think it's pretty much a universal given that the Bears are not going to win this one. Again, Seattle is one of, if not the best team in football. The Bears, it'll be a good challenge to see where the Bears are at. Because if they're able to hold their own in Seattle against this team, then that's really putting them on the right track. So I have them at 1-2. Fourth game is against the Raiders. And the Raiders are a much better team than they're probably getting a lot of credit for. They've got a lot of talent, but they're still a team that has no identity, and they're still a lot of pieces away from actually making any sort of impact. So I see the Bears winning this at Soldier Field, and they are 2-2. At the Kansas City Chiefs. Chiefs are a tough team. It's going to be a tough matchup in Kansas City. I'm going to go... John Fox knows this team, but I'm still going to go with it's going to be a close game, but I'm going to go the Chiefs because it's in Kansas City. So the Bears are at this point are 2-3. Then they're at the Lions. I think the Bears beat the Lions, 3-3. Then they play the Vikings at home, beat the Vikings, 4-3. Let me correct that right. So 1-1, 1-2, 2-2, 2-3. Yeah, so they're 4-3 at this point. Then at San Diego, I think they win that one. The 5-3. At the Rams, that's a tough one. I'm gonna say that they lose to the Rams because it's in St. Louis, and they are 5-4. And they play the Broncos at home. I think that's a loss, 5-5. At Green Bay, that's a loss. That's 5-6. Home against the 49ers, that is a win. That is 6-6. You've got the Redskins at home. That's a win, 7-6. At the Vikings, that's a win, 8-6. At the Buccaneers, that's a win, 9-6. Lions, I'm going to go with a split. So I have the Bears at 9-7. I think that's fairly realistic there. 9-7. This is not the world beater of schedules. Everyone's assuming the Vikings are going to be good because they really want Teddy Bridgewater to be great, but the guy hasn't proven anything in this league yet, and he's still a young quarterback. And if you throw a complicated defensive system at him, how's he going to react? So that's why I think that the USA Today projection is crap. That's a lot of talking about the Bears after only a couple of days of training camp. So I'm gonna stop there and move on to a little bit of baseball. So Cubbies first, fresh off a 4-game sweep of the Milwaukee Brewers, and after Monday's rainout, playing a 2-game series against Pittsburgh, and then on to a 4-game home series against the Giants. This really could shape up to what the wild card race is going to look like for the National League. As it looks right now, there's really absolutely no chance of the Cubs winning the division. Cardinals are running away with it. It sucks. I hate the Cardinals, but that's the reality of it. But if the Cubs can pull off another win against the Pittsburgh tomorrow, like they did today, they're only 2 games back behind Pittsburgh for the first wild card spot, and they're currently half game up on the Giants for the second wild card spot. And unless you have the Mets tumble and Washington suddenly turns it back around from the rough slump that they're in, this is really a race between Pittsburgh, San Francisco Giants, and the Cubs for 2 playoff spots. After a bit of a rocky start to the second half of the season, the Cubs are really finding their groove, and I think that managerial experience with Joe Madden is starting to show it this way the young team is performing. It's really not hurting that your top 2 pitchers over the past 30 days have a 0.94 whip and a .74 whip. That includes another gem by Arrieta tonight. Those 2 pitchers are just absolutely filthy right now. And speaking of the pitching staff, in the wake of Monday's postponement, the rainout game against the Pirates, Joe Madden has switched up the way the pitching rotation is going to go. So you have John Lester only pitched an inning and 2/3. So his start's been moved up a day. So you're going to have Lester starting game 2 against the Giants series on Friday afternoon instead of going Saturday. So for the next 6 games, we're assuming the weather is cooperative. You're going to have Jake Arrieta already pitched today, got the win. Dan Herron is going to get his first appearance as a Cub in the finale of that Pirate series. Jason Hamill is going to take game 1 of the Giants series. John Lester going to get game 2, Kyle Hendricks 3, and Jake Arrieta game 4. So hopefully with Lester and Arrieta, the way they've been pitching and getting both of those guys in the series, hopefully the Cubs can at least split the series against the Giants and hold their position, if nothing else. Hopefully with Hamill pitching on Thursday, they can get the series win. That would be awesome to gain a game on the Giants, especially being at home. But we'll see how Hamill pitches. And then talking about our 2 newest Cubs is, like I said, Dan Herron is going to get his first shot at being a pitcher for the Cubs. And I believe he said he's going to retire at the end of the season. So this is his last hurrah. This is his last chance to try to win a World Series. And granted, he's not the Dan Herron that he has been in the past, but the way that the 5th rotation spot for the Cubs has been this year, he's got to be considered a step up to whatever they've had between Travis Wood and Tyoshi Wada and whoever else has been the 5 starter. It's been almost like an automatic loss. So hopefully he can at least be serviceable, if nothing else, an innings eater to preserve this bullpen. And then the other new Cub is Tommy Hunter. I know a lot of people were really upset by the Cubs' very minor moves, but this really fit in with what Jed and Theo had planned for the Cubs and this organization. They didn't spend all these years being bottom feeders and churning over this roster and finding talent everywhere they could in order to just trade it all away for one shot at a 1-game playoff series against Pittsburgh, to hopefully play in a full round of a playoff series. That's 2015 was a year that they were supposed to play very well, and they are. It wasn't supposed to be the year they competed. I mean, it's the first time that you're seeing Addison Russell and Kyle Schwarber and Chris Bryant getting playing times, and these guys are going through their growing pains. So you have to give these guys time, and to trade away all of this talent for a rental player, it just didn't fit in with what Jed and Theo were trying to do. And they said they weren't going to make any sort of moves unless they were very low risk moves where they didn't have to give up any sort of viable talent, or they brought in a piece that would be under team control for several years, like a Cole Hamels, where he's under team control for several more years. They would be willing to give up some of their picks to get a guy like that. Unfortunately, he didn't go with them. He got traded elsewhere. So Dan Herron and Tommy Hunter came over. Dan Herron for 2 lowly pitchers that weren't on anybody's radar for anything, and Tommy Hunter for Junior Lake, who I like Junior Lake. He seems like a nice enough guy. But he is not upper echelon talent for within the Cubs organization. He might be the best of the young outfielders so far, but he's going to get surpassed sooner rather than later, and there's no spot for him in the future. So might as well give him a shot. Hopefully he can make do in Baltimore and have a good run there. But like I said, Dan Herron is about to get his first game action. And Tommy Hunter has looked fantastic. Granted, he's only had 2 appearances so far, but 0 hits, 0 walks, and he's 1 for 1 for save opportunities. That's just what this team needed because, with Neil Ramirez, your best bullpen guy, going back on the DL, you need some infusion of life into that bullpen. And Neil Ramirez, granted, he didn't look great when he came back from the disabled list, but I just think he was never right to begin with. I think he was just trying to get back. He might be. Hopefully, he's able to come back and play this year with playing at a high level. But just because the Cubs the non-waiver trade deadline has passed, that doesn't mean the Cubs are done making moves. I really don't necessarily think that means that. There's certainly moves to be had, and one rumor I've heard, and I don't know how substantial it is that the Cubs are considering making a waiver transaction trade with the Philadelphia Phillies to bring Chase Utley here. I mean, I would have to see the details of it. I mean, are the Cubs going to eat that ridiculous contract of his, or are the Phillies going to send a bunch of money with it? What are the Cubs going to have to give up? If it's basically a salary dump and you want to bring Chase Utley here to come off the bench, I'm more than happy with that. I think he still has a little bit left in the tank, and he definitely has postseason experience. It could be good to spell the second base position and maybe stabilize a little bit when you need to give Addison Russell a day off to to kind of get his mind back into a baseball frame of thought. I don't think that's a bad move, and Chase Utley's a good locker room guy, good clubhouse guy, and a veteran bat to give Joe Madden to come off the bench. I think that might be a nice move, but again, that was one rumor I heard, and I don't know how substantial it is. Some other Cubby notes. They recalled Matt Caesar from AAA Iowa to make room on the 25-man roster. They designated Clayton Richards for assignment, which I expect him to go back down to AAA rather than getting claimed or getting outrighted. So I think Clayton Richard remains with the team, but just not on the Major League roster. So with the 2 roster moves, the Cubs' 40-man roster stands at 38 players, and the 25-man roster consists of 13 pitchers, 5 starters, 8 relievers, and 12 position players. Clayton Richard picks up the win Sunday in Milwaukee. He gave up 1 run in 6 innings, and he also drove in a run with a double. And they definitely have expressed their interest in keeping him with the team. So we'll see how that progresses. Then a scary moment with the Cubs is during yesterday's game, Chris Bryant slid headfirst into second base trying to stretch an RBI single in the 5th inning of that 4-3 win against the Brewers, and ended up having to go through the concussion protocol. He was quoted as saying, "I'm feeling better and we'll see what it feels like tomorrow." But he was feeling dizzy and walked off the field in the middle of Sunday's game against at Miller Park. But he ended up coming back. Monday was a rain delay. He came back in Tuesday's game against the Brewers. Didn't show any sort of ill effects. But all in all, it was a little bit of a scary moment because although he's not on that same tear that he was at the beginning of the season, he's still one of the better hitters for the Cubs and somebody that they're going to need going forward. What else do we have as Cubs news? Tyoshi Wada got activated from the 15-day disabled list, and he was optioned to AAA Iowa, which wasn't really a move considering that he was pitching for Iowa Cubs since July 11th on rehab starts. So they're basically just going to option and keep him there. If you guys remember, Tyoshi Wada got placed on the 15-day disabled list at the end of June with a left deltoid inflammation. And this year, in his 7 starts, he's 1-1 with a 3.73 ERA, a 1.28 WHIP. He's allowed 13 runs on 29 hits, 11 walks, 31 strikeouts, and 31 and a third innings. So you consider he started 7 games and only gone 31 and a third innings. That's not even averaging 5 innings a game, and that's part of the reason that Yoshiwada is not the 5th starter anymore. So he basically averaged 4 2/3 innings per start. And finally, the last thing I want to talk about the Cubs is, we all know that the Cubs have a lot of talent they're trying to make room for and coming up, and they're trying to figure out who's going to be playing what and where. And right now, they're coming into another situation where, with Miguel Montero getting ready to come back from his disabled list, you're going to have another situation where you have 3 catchers on your roster. They had this at the beginning of the season and made a trade where they only had Montero and David Ross. But when Montero got hurt, they called up Kyle Schwarber. And the Cubs are looking for ways to keep Schwarber's bat in the lineup. So what do they do? Do they bench Miguel Montero? I don't know if you do that because he's a veteran bat, and he's also by far and away your best catching catcher. And especially considering we're going into the later part of the season, you want that. You want a guy who's got the veteran experience to be on your team. So do you move Kyle Schwarber into the outfield? Do you possibly move him into left field and move Chris Coghlan to right and displace Jorge Soler? That's a possibility. But we'll see what happens. Jorge Soler is basically one of the moving parts here. Joe Madden called him Vlad Guerrero if Vlad Guerrero had plate discipline. And he also said that if he hadn't been born in Cuba, he would have been number 1 overall pick in the draft the year he came out. But Jorge Soler is still a young kid. He's only 23 years old, and he's going through his growing pains. He's only played in 151 major league games over 3 seasons. It's not surprising that he's still having his ups and downs. But he's also probably the most talented hitter that the Cubs have on their roster. And I think he's going to end up being better than Addison Russell and Chris Bryant. So do you really want to take him out of the lineup for a guy like Chris Coghlan? You still want to keep Kyle Schwarber in there because he's the hottest bat you have. It's a tough thing to consider. You've got talented guys who are not playing up to their potential yet just because of their age. You've got another guy who's being played out of his position, but his bat is so hot that you have to throw him into an outfield. And then you've got the guys who are actually performing now, but their ceilings aren't very high. It leaves a tough position, and Dexter Fowler is a guy that you could consider moving, but he's your legitimate leadoff guy, and he's the only real center fielder you have on the roster right now. So it's gonna be tricky to see what they do. And before today's game, Coghlan was seen. He was playing second base for the Cubs during warm-ups. If that's something that he could actually do in a game, that could free up Addison Russell to go play shortstop. You could sit Starlin Castro while he works through whatever kind of funk he's in. But that's another possibility. But one possibility that is not happening is Javi Baez coming up anytime soon. I mean, it's only been 7 games since he's come back to Iowa Cubs, but in those 7 games, he's got a 1.118 OPS in 7 games. And that's pretty good, but he was also on a tear when he came up last time for the Cubs, and we saw how that went. But I don't think you'll see Javi Baez coming up this season. I think he's just going to keep working for the rest of the season in Iowa and possibly come up next year or be traded. Finally, I'm going to wrap it up on a low note with the White Sox. Last time we talked, they were the hot team, and they were shooting out of the cellar of the AL Central and shooting up in the ranks of the American League wild card. But since that point, they've really come back down to earth. It hasn't been pretty for the White Sox since that winning streak ended. And tonight was just pretty much downright ugly. Chris Sale had his second straight poor start, and Tampa Bay took advantage, and they beat the White Sox at U.S. Cellular 11-3. Sale allowed 7 runs, 2 home runs, 2 of the 4 home runs that Tampa hit. And since they've won that 7 straight games that they had coming out of the coming out of the All-Star game, the White Sox have lost 5 of 6 and have been outscored 51-26 during that stretch. And you've had Avi Garcia hit his first home run since June 8th tonight. And right now they've lost 3 straight games and have fallen to 4.5 games out of the wild card spot, and they're back to being 7 teams behind for that wild card spot. So they've got to leapfrog 7 teams to get that second wild card. And they've also fallen towards the back of the cellar of the AL Central again. And granted, let's not blow it all out of proportion yet, that there's still 50-something games left to play. But they're back in a really tough spot. And I guess maybe we got swept up a little bit by that winning streak. But they're really in a tough spot again. And I keep saying this, that I don't think the White Sox are as bad as they have been this season, and I don't think they're as good as they have been this season. They're not playing to the level I think that they're supposed to be playing at. But that 7-game winning streak was basically on the back of great pitching, great fielding, and Melky Cabrera's bat. But Melky can't continue on that torrid pace. It's just not going to happen. And Sale is the horse that they need to ride if they have any shot of making the playoffs. And he's had 2 consecutive awful starts. The team as a whole has a 682 team OPS, which hovers at the bottom of Major League Baseball. They're just a couple spots above the Mets, who are absolutely worst in baseball. And over their last 4 combined starts, Chris Sale has a 12.19 ERA. Jeff Samardzija has a 17.36 ERA. And drumroll, Carlos Rodon has a whopping 24 ERA. And that's not how you get it done. It's so rough right now that the highlight of the organization is the promotion of Trace Thompson to the Major League roster. You may know him as his brother plays for the NBA champion Golden State Warriors. But they promoted him from AAA Charlotte with his hitting line was a 260, 304, 441 slash line with 13 home runs. If that's the highlight of what you're going through right now, that's a pretty rough spot. And which leads me to, where are the White Sox going with their promotion of their farm system? It's a little bit weird. Rodon was called up earlier this season after stating he would not be called up. They call him up. Then you bring up infielder Tyler Saladino, who was your 13th ranked prospect in your farm system. He gets called up last month, and he's actually hitting a respectable 256 with a 300 on-base percentage. And then you call up Trace Thompson, who's your 15th ranked prospect. He's had 1 at-bat so far, and that was a strikeout. And so it makes you wonder how the White Sox are managing their farm system, as opposed to the Cubs. So all is not good in White Sox land. It's, granted that, like I said, there's 50-something games left in the season, but they're going to have to figure out a lot of things on the fly in order to turn this ship the right direction. The offense has struggled all season long. You can't ride one hot bat for a whole season. 7-game winning streak? Sure. 162 game season? No. Sorry, not so much. The starting pitching has, when John Danks is your best pitcher over the past 10 games, then that's sad. Maybe even the past 3 weeks, John Danks your best pitcher. Eesh. They're gonna have to right the ship on that. I mean, Rodon, I don't care if he's their 4th starter, he's got to pitch better. Chris Sale has to pitch better. Jeff Samardzija, he's got to pitch better for a lot of reasons. 1, for this team to do anything, and 2, if he wants to get paid. He's been wanting to get paid for a long time. He's finally going to be a free agent at the end of the season. And going down the stretch, he's posting a 17 plus ERA. This is not the way to go about it. So let's just stay tuned, and there's still a long way to go in this season, and we'll see how the next week progresses, and we'll talk about it on the next episode for the White Sox and the Cubs both. So I guess that's going to wrap up this episode. Thank you guys for listening, and like I said at the beginning of the show, make sure you're hitting us on Twitter at Swerski Sports, Facebook.com/Swerski Sports. Go to the website, SwerskiSports.com. Follow us on our social media. Subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, however you're listening. And thank you guys so much for listening. And until next time, bear down.
Cubs win! What a lucky break! The good Lord wants the Cubs to win!
We thank Ditka and God for all they have provided.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her, you can have her, she's a Packer fan. She can't fit in my van.
And she looks like number New Yorkers. Smoking crack is not legal on planes.
Bears 31 to -7.
The Bears. Oh, when the Bears go bearing down.